Here you go.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Dixon? Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Mr. Scrivano?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch? Here. Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Escobedo?
Here.
With 6 present, 1 absent, we have a quorum.
Mr. Dixon's here.
Oh, never mind.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, with 7 present, we have a quorum.
Before we're going further, I'd like to thank Connor, who's in the back helping out with the broadcast on Channel 20. Remind all board members we hold and write your questions down until after the presentations are completed, and then we'll go around and try to have a discussion or comments, whatever. So, are there any corrections to or changes to the minutes from our January 15th meeting? If not, is there consensus to approve those minutes? Okay. All right, so we'll now move on to new business, and Mr. Phillips is going to do our first presentation on the Bellis firm of architecture design services for a walk-in freezer at Flynn.
Good evening. This is a recommendation to utilize Bellis firm of architecture for design services to replace the walk-in cooler freezer at Flynn Middle School. This is a 17 by 19 self-supporting structure that sits on a pad. It's attached to the building and flashed to make sure we have no water penetration, and is accessed through the kitchen of the cafeteria. What we're experiencing is the exterior walls delaminating, which is allowing water into the inner portions of the wall and causing further structural damage to the structure. It is, I don't know the exact age of the unit, but as far as the refrigeration units, it's drastically out of date, doesn't meet current energy codes. So we're asking to be able to utilize Bellis to review the structural pad, work with the to develop bid specs that we can bid this freezer, a new freezer, as well as being able to attach it to the building. Bellis's fees would be $8,000. We're estimating the cost of the replacement of the freezer, as well as any attachment to the building and anything we have to do to the structural pad, to be around $60,000 to $70,000. What we're recommending going forward is just using Bellis for the design services.
Okay. Any comments or questions from board members? Okay. This will return to us on the 12th for a approval on an action item. Thank you, Michael. All right. Next we have the Carey Show. Okay. And I didn't mention this, but I think the word is out that due to the weather and the road conditions, we're going to shorten our agenda tonight and pull a bunch of the finance reports and do those next time. So curriculum stuff is all going to get covered tonight. So you're up first with the World of Music Elementary Music Resource Adoption with Brian.
Yes, and I'm actually going to introduce there are 3 deans here with us tonight because they're going to present their resource adoption. So we have Brian Doreen, who is our Dean of Fine Arts, Physical Education, and Health, and he'll be presenting the first two adoptions.
Okay.
David Allen is our Dean of Science, and he'll be presenting our secondary science adoption, and then Ben Epperson is our Dean of Math, and he'll be presenting our Integrated Math 2 resource adoption. And so I'm going to turn it over to Brian Doreen.
Okay.
Good evening.
Hi.
Our elementary music teachers lack common resources to support students in creating, performing, responding, and connecting with and through music, as required by the new Illinois Arts Learning Standards. As we move further towards an integrated elementary curriculum, the music classroom is a currently under-tapped resource for supporting development of inquiry, literacy, and numeracy skills. Music classroom is also uniquely suited to foster collaboration and social-emotional learning through a variety of large and small group learning opportunities, exploration of interests and connections between the arts, personal experience in the world. Without sufficient instructional resources, teachers struggle to find time to optimize learning for students, engage them through technology, expose them to professional opportunities and careers within the arts, and focus on developing those social and emotional skills. Without a high-quality common resource, we'll continue to struggle to fully support a guaranteed and viable curriculum that prepares students with the skills they will need in middle school and high school for those ensembles. Currently, we are using the Spotlight on Music resource, which does not fully align to our essential learning outcomes as developed by the curriculum team through the curriculum design process. The included audio and technology pieces are not performed in authentic instruments and are not highly engaging for our students. The materials are antiquated and they're not aligned to the best practice pedagogies. The resource also does not include embedded opportunities for inquiry, collaboration, or other learning aligned with district goals. Through the curriculum design process, the curriculum leadership team, which is made up of 5 elementary music teachers, including representation from our special programs, has developed and sequenced essential learning outcomes and learning targets as the framework for instruction and assessment. We've also defined student proficiency for core learning outcomes at each grade level. As teachers have begun using the curriculum map in elementary buildings, the need for a common resource that supports a variety of methodologies has become clearly evident. As part of this process, we looked at 3 different alternatives for an elementary resource. The first one being Prodigies, which is another technological platform. This resource would require the purchase of a classroom set for each building. You don't get anything that's actually online or is customizable. You would just kind of get a set of CDs and manipulatives for the classroom. Each school would require a classroom set at a cost of $25,000, or $2,500, for a total cost of $67,500 for the district. Some of the concerns with Prodigies was it's not customizable to fit our ELOs, does not utilize the variety of best instructional practices and pedagogies. It has some video components, but does not allow students to utilize technology in a meaningful way. Does not provide any analytics to monitor implementation. It lacks high-quality embedded assessments, does not come with any included PD or support, and is not updated regularly with new materials and information. The other, one of the alternatives we looked at was just continuing to use our current resource. As I said, that does not align well to our map, our essential learning outcomes and targets, and that is actually out of print. And then we considered not adopting a common resource, but the concern was that will continue the current inequity of instruction and resources, the lack of common expectation for growth and achievement without a clearly articulated scope and sequence of skills, and a struggle to integrate technology and best instructional practices uniformly into our elementary music classrooms. The solution that we are proposing is to adopt Quaver's Marvelous World of Music. This resource has embedded portfolio assessment and other performance opportunities within an entirely digital interface. Quaver is highly customizable. Our curriculum leadership team will have full freedom to align the lessons and materials in support of our essential learning outcomes. This resource supports a number of best practice instructional pedagogies, allowing teachers to not only develop students' artistic literacy, but support their overall academic and social growth through explicit literacy and numeracy instruction, opportunities for exploration and inquiry, and collaborative learning. Quaver is highly engaged in utilizing a wide range of professional exemplars and targeted lessons and activities to excite and challenge students as they grow as young musicians. We are proposing a Quaver site license for each one of our elementary buildings, including the special programs. And this change will impact our K-5 general music students and teachers, as I said, in all of those buildings. This resource aligns with Goal 1, Strategy 1, the district strategic plan. Our new curriculum maps for K-5 music are based on the Illinois Arts Learning Standards and focus on the 4 artistic processes of create, perform, respond, and connect. Quaver resources directly address the requirements of each artistic process. Students learn to create original musical ideas to communicate an intended message or meaning to a specific audience or for a specific purpose. Students learn to perform a variety of developmentally appropriate music and to analyze and critique high-quality musical examples that span historical time periods and diverse cultural backgrounds. Finally, students are provided a variety of lenses through which to examine the reciprocal relationship between music and culture and daily life, beginning with their individual experience and learning to take other perspectives as they mature. Because Quaver is fully customizable, it will allow us to align our expectations and instruction with the requirements of middle school and high school. In addition to the sign and symbol language of music, Quaver supports development of leverageable skills such as creative and critical thinking, analysis and use of evidence, and problem solving. Total cost for this initiative is $126,000, which would be captured over a 3-year period. That would be, you can see the individual cost per building for a 3-year site license is $5,040 for the 25 elementary and special programs buildings. This would be paid for out of the curriculum department through the K-12 Fine Arts Resource Adoption. Success for this implementation will be measured through several lenses. We'll monitor teacher and engagement and feedback through the district PLC. The student feedback and engagement through some surveys. We will be able to pull analytics on usage through the common assessments and some of the data pieces that are available at district level. And then data from those common assessment items determined by the CLT will be used to collect evidence of student growth. Our project milestones. In August of 2019, at the Institute Day, we're anticipating doing initial full training for all of our teachers in the resource and how it aligns to our curriculum map. And then in spring of 2020, 2021, there will be additional follow-up professional development from the company, and we will be collecting information from teachers on the usage. And then anticipating in winter 21-22, a renewal decision being made. For the return on investment, we're focusing on the opportunity cost, particularly on being able to support our elementary music teachers in balancing the limited amount of time that they have with their students, but also giving them a wide range of high-quality instructional resources. So given that limited and varied amount of time in their buildings, the teachers need a high-quality resource that's rich and adaptable. Quaver offers teachers a plethora of material for core concepts at each grade level, supporting them in effectively planning and differentiating to meet the demands of both their curriculum and their schedule. For our reporting back, we are anticipating to do our initial reporting back after the first trimester of the fall of 2019, and then annually to instructional council or as needed.
Board member questions or comments? Mr. Siegel.
What funding sources would you be looking towards to acquire the iPads that go with this?
The iPads would initially through the EBF funding, which, the
Evidence-based.
evidence-based funding, but then through alternative sources once we hit it back on that. Okay.
And we're partnering with Jason Barthel and his department. We've done an analysis of all the devices in our buildings, and so we're looking at how we can repurpose a few of those as well to be put into the music classrooms, because we do have quite a few iPads already in our elementary buildings.
Mr. Connor, you're next.
A couple questions. Actually, I was going to ask on the technical side, so can you make sure to come back to us and say how many are reusable? And do I assume that, how do I want to put it? Is it just like a cloud connection, or do you have to download actual software to the individual iPads?
It's a cloud connection.
It is. Okay, so there's really nothing you have to do, because that was going to be one of my questions, that there's no preparation on that particular, each individual iPad that you have to do, other than the connection and testing?
There's a
like
yeah,
drivers
just have,
or, yeah.
Exactly. And we've already collaborated with the ITIS department to make sure that we would have full compatibility with them.
Okay. So that was just a technical question. So my real question is, I read the solution and the return on investment. So I think, I understand the logic, and no problem in one sense on what you're trying to do educationally. And I'm glad to see that there are analytics built into this. But when I read the return on investment, the only suggestion I've got here is, I don't think it was clear to me what we're really trying to accomplish with the metrics, meaning what are we looking for? Is there a particular growth? Is there some correlation? You know, what kinds of things are we looking to get out of this? That would be
As far as the embedded analytics?
the actual, so
Sure.
it's one thing that if the software has the capability, you know, to say the difference between beginning and end of semester, whatever you're tracking. But when I read the return on investment, or the academic return on investment, I wasn't clear on like what kinds of statistics, what kinds of metrics are you interested in? Because it was mostly worded as, hey, this will support, you know, the rest of it. And my mind actually went, so what parts will it support? What do you expect as an outcome? So when you come back, you know, to that reporting for the first trimester, what kinds of things are you going to be looking to change to support what you've got as that paragraph for the ROI? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so a lot of that's going to is focused around the scope and sequence of skills that we're really looking to establish and articulate all the way from elementary up through high school. One of the concerns that the team has really tried to address in collaboration with the middle school and high school teams is making sure that we are really preparing our students for their middle school and their high school music experience so that they come in with the knowledge and skills for that. So some of that is going to be around making sure that we're actually meeting all of the kind of benchmarks that are established by the scope and sequence that this team has developed.
So, if I might say so, so you know the skills you're looking to be developed, say in middle school, and you know the level of it, this software tool will measure that, so you'll have a concrete thing that says, you know, they're able to tell a half note from a quarter note or whatever.
Exactly.
Those are the kinds of, so when you say music skills and experience, there are specific things we could track, and then when you come back for the reporting, you can say 25% improved this much, et cetera, et cetera. That's the idea then on the metrics for this?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So will we track this as a year-over-year measure also? So like where we have cohorts, that kind of thing as well? So that sounds more like an individual level, right? That kids hit this number, you're going to do a comparative, right?
We
So-
would have, I believe that we would have the ability to set it up so that we could do either just kind of tracking where they are throughout the year, but then also we can pull data to do a year-over-year comparison.
Okay. It was mostly around the metrics.
Sure.
Any other, I'm sorry, any other board members, comments or questions? Okay, thank you, Brian. You can go to your second presentation on
All right.
secondary schools.
So I'm going to pick up where I left off with elementary now, starting with middle school. So similar to elementary, the problem that we're seeking to address is the lack of common instructional resources for middle and high school band, choir, and orchestra courses. Our middle and high school performance ensemble courses lack a common instructional resource to support our new curriculum map. Common high-quality resources to support planning, instruction, and assessment are necessary for achieving an articulated and aligned system that develops individual and ensemble musicianship and prepares students for participation in college programs. This need is particularly evident in the transition between middle school and high school. Common resources are also essential to the work of the building and district professional learning communities, allowing teachers to plan, assess, and analyze data through the SMART process. Our lack of common resources affects our mobile student population as students transferring from one program to another struggle to adapt without a common instructional tool and sequence of instruction. Without a common resource, teachers are currently selecting and purchasing instructional materials and repertoire separately for each class or building. This practice has resulted in a disparity of resources and an emphasis on selecting music for performance value rather than instructional value. And it also has made it very difficult to support that scope and sequence of skills. It's going to be giving them the musicianship, all of those pieces as far as their elements and skills so that they can go on and be ready to perform in college. For alternative choices, we actually considered 8 potential resources, and I'm going to show that to you in kind of a broad scope and then break it down into the 2 that we decided to focus on. This was a collaborative process of 6th to 12th grade teachers. We have 10 teachers on the team. The teams worked separately for individual and instrumental music and then came together at the end to kind of compare their results. So this graphic will show you the different alternatives that we did consider. So each column with a different color is a different resource that we looked at. You can see the rubric score there. When teachers completed a quite extensive rubric on each one of these. And then underneath it, the highlighted boxes would show where we determined that the resource was appropriate for the courses and the levels that we were looking to meet. Our evaluation was based on the embedded opportunities for formative and summative assessment, instructional support, including pacing and accessibility for students and teachers, as well as how it supported the scope and sequence of skills that we had established, alignment to our essential learning outcomes, the quality and quantity of supplemental materials, and then if it had any technological support. Out of that process, the two that we elected to focus on were essential elements and foundations for superior performance. Essential elements was the only method that would support band, choir, and orchestra. Essential elements best aligned to our ELOs and our pacing of instruction, including that clear and aligned scope and sequence of skills. Essential Elements has the most robust set of supplemental resources and aligned performance repertoire. And it also has Essential Elements Interactive, which is a free online practicing tool for students in levels 1 and 2, which would be our middle school band and orchestra. It aligns also with Foundations for Superior Performance, which is the text that the teachers elected for the high school band courses, the higher level band 2 and 3. And then Foundation for Superior Performance out of the high school text best aligned to our ELOs, and the teachers also felt that would best prepare students for the demands of performance in college. Again, aligned with our scope and sequence of skills that we kind of backwards planned from what colleges are expecting. So the solution that we're proposing is to adopt essential elements for 6th to 9th grade band, 6th to 12th grade orchestra, and 6th to 12th grade choir, and then to adopt Foundations for Superior Performance for 10th to 12th grade band. These resources have multiple levels of method books for all the ensembles. They offer embedded assessment opportunities and a substantial library of fully aligned supplemental repertoire. Essential Elements Levels 1 and 2 for band and orchestra includes free access to the Essential Elements Interactive, an internet-based platform that provides recordings of excerpts and repertoire, and the opportunity for students to record and submit assignments. We're also proposing to adopt Foundations for Superior Performance as the core resource for band 2 and 3. This resource continues the development of individual and ensemble skills as students select, analyze, and perform more complex repertoire. The adoption supports a clear scope and sequence of instruction across all of these grade levels. This initiative would be supported through the ongoing annual purchase of student texts by the curriculum department to ensure that all students have access to high-quality instructional resources. This change would impact band, choir, and orchestra students in all of our middle school and high school programs, including our special programs. And it aligns with Goal 1, Strategy 1. Our new curriculum maps for secondary music are based on Illinois Arts Learning Standards and focus on the 4 artistic processes of create, perform, respond, and connect. Our selected resources directly address the requirements of creating and performing and support the development of the knowledge and skills for responding and connecting. Students will benefit from a clearly articulated and aligned sequence of instruction, as well as the opportunity to learn and perform a variety of diverse literature at an appropriate level of complexity. The initial cost for this adoption would be $90,442. That would be purchasing the student and teacher texts for all 6th to 12th grade band, choir, and orchestra, as well as a set of supplemental titles that were selected by the curriculum leadership team. And then we have a projected recurring cost of $23,872. That would change a little bit depending on how many students we had in each class, but that is just to purchase the student method books moving forward to make sure that we can fully support this. That will be purchased out of the curriculum department from the K-12 Fine Arts Resource Adoption line and be captured in FY19. We're looking to do most of our monitoring through the professional learning communities, both at the building and at the district level. We'll be collecting teacher feedback on use of the resource and student feedback and monitoring their engagement. Data from common assessment items determined by the curriculum leadership teams and district PLC, the professional learning community, will be used to also collect evidence of student growth. In August of 2019, at the Institute Day, teachers will receive their initial training in the resource and also the alignment to our map, and then ongoing progress will be monitored to the curriculum leadership teams and the curriculum implementation leaders and reported back to instructional council as needed. For the return on investment, we also chose to focus here on the opportunity cost. This resource will support the implementation of our new curriculum map, including the embedded instructional shifts and desired student outcomes. Adoption of a common 612 resource will particularly support student learning through the transition between middle and high school and best prepare students for the requirements of collegiate programs. As I mentioned, annual progress reporting and monitoring will be reported back to instructional council annually or as needed. And that's it. I'll take any questions.
My turn. Mr. Siegel.
I have just a couple real quick ones.
Sure.
I noticed that in 4B for the elementary school, there was, in the PDSA, there was no need to partner with curriculum or improvement and innovation, but in the secondary level, you do have partnering with curriculum and innovation and improvement. I wonder if you could tell me why no for one and yes for the other.
I'm not sure. That might just be an error on my part, and I apologize. So the curriculum will be supporting the initial purchase and has done the work of electing these resources. I think for I&I, the innovation improvement, I believe that was just an error.
So I&I would not be involved with,
No.
I guess personally, I think it'd be kind of cool if they were. I think that they have opportunities to work on helping, I guess, align the music opportunities the students have with the rest of their.
I'm currently working on some professional learning for our teachers in collaboration with them, but for this resource adoption, we wouldn't need to partner with them just for that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Connor.
Same comment on metrics. So, then the other thing is, would this be applied at the time of the band or orchestra or choir rehearsals, or is this something they would do outside by themselves?
This would be both. It would be used both as the primary practice tool for a student when they're working at home, because the method books that we're really looking to adopt with Essential Elements and Foundation for Superior Performance are really the clearly articulated sequence of progression for all of those skills and concepts. They would also be used during class for instruction and for warm-ups and things like that, but it would not replace performing actual repertoire.
Okay. Yeah, well, I didn't figure, but it was more, I was wondering when they were going to do it. So it sounds like you might have some method stuff you do in the classroom, but you would expect the students on their own to be able to do this at home, essentially.
Yes.
So do we know if this is a connection, are we requiring our students to have essentially an internet connection to be able to do this?
For the Essential Elements Interactive, they would need an internet connection in order to utilize that, but it's available on any device, and that's not a piece that we're looking to require. If you were to go across to Gazzardo's or Randy's Music, anybody can pick up a copy of Essential Elements that just comes with a code. So I just want to kind of share that that's there as an option for students and teachers to use, but it would not be a required component.
I think the only thing that we're sensitive to is that kids have equal access to whatever it was. That's why I was curious if there was a requirement on that.
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Escobedo.
Actually, not a question. I just got a quick request, if possible. If you can point me to any data that shows demographics and breakdown of who's participating in any voluntary music programs, as far as breakdown of demographics of our students.
Yeah, I can get that.
Weeks, whenever, nothing, just...
Sure. I'll have to.
Okay. These two items will come back to us on the 12th for an approval. And David, I think, is next, right?
Yes.
Secondary science resource adoption.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'm here to talk about some resources for middle school and high school science courses. Currently, as a district, we lack a resource for inquiry aligned to the next generation science standards at the secondary level. Inquiry is a fundamental shift in the next generation science standards, and without a resource, the district currently lacks a system-wide model for ensuring continuity of any sort of implementation of those practices. We have rolled out new biology and 6-8 science curriculum this school year, and we're going to follow that with new chemistry and integrated science 1 curriculum next year, and then physics and integrated science 2 for the 2021 school year. Currently, students are experiencing a pretty wide range of inquiry experiences in both type and amount. Really, this is because there's no real single resource or model in the district to provide any guidance for teachers for how these could be planned or look. In order to address this issue, currently the curriculum leadership teams for the science courses in middle and high school have been creating sample inquiry-based unit plans for these courses, aligning them mostly to our current textbook materials and also teacher-generated experiences that they've either created themselves or they can find in other places. And they're doing that to provide guidance on implementing instructional practices aligned to the next generation science standards. So everything at this point has been created from the curriculum leadership teams. To address the problem, there were a few different alternatives we considered. The first was to just continue the current approach of having curriculum leadership teams create inquiry and lab experiences on their own, using only our current district resources and teacher-created or found materials. This would have no additional cost. However, this has been extremely challenging for the teams, as it's been really difficult to create those experiences without appropriate supporting resources for teachers. Currently, our textbooks in our classroom are just information sources, so they contain the content that students can read from, but they don't have any sort of instructional guidance for teachers. So they're serving mostly as encyclopedias in a way where students can read the information from them, but they're not providing teacher guidance for instruction around that content. We also looked at the possibility of adopting a new textbook resource from other publishers that we're not currently using. However, because of the integrated nature of our science courses and the fact that they're including content from multiple areas of science, there are not a large number of resources which really adequately align to both the standards and vision of our courses. A pretty extensive search of various publishers did not produce a resource which both aligned to the proper content of the next generation science standards as outlined in our courses and provided teachers with the instructional support needed for the shifts required by the standards. Most new textbooks have simply reordered the chapters. The content in the books is exactly the same as the content in the books we currently have. So adopting a brand new textbook would still not provide any of that instructional guidance for teachers. It would simply be taking the information we already have in our classrooms and reshuffling it. In addition, this option would have come at a significantly high cost, as textbooks that we researched began at $100 a student just for the book. At that cost, the total for textbooks to cover both middle and high school core courses would have been approximately $1.2 million, and that would have literally just been for the book. That would not have included any other instructional resources or professional development for teachers, and truly would not have been giving us anything in our classrooms we didn't currently already have. In order to solve this problem, the biology, 10-11 science, and 6-8 science curriculum leadership teams recommend the purchase of defined STEM for both our middle school and high school courses, and argument-driven inquiry published by NSTA Press for our biology, chemistry, physics, and integrated science 1 and 2 courses. For defined STEM, this would include a 3-year defined STEM license, 4 professional development days, and assistance with customizing performance tasks to match the district curriculum the curriculum leadership teams have developed. Argument-driven inquiry would include digital copies of argument-driven inquiry teacher guides for biology, physics, chemistry, and earth science, as well as 1 day of professional development for each of the content areas. There'd be 2 for earth science, for a total of 6 professional development days. Both argument-driven inquiry and defined STEM provide teachers with extensive resources aligned both to the instructional shifts of the next generation science standards as well as the content. And they also align to the Common Core state standards for both English language arts and math. Additionally, Defined STEM is currently utilized in our elementary schools, so using this resource in middle school and high school would increase the alignment of our inquiry practices across the entire system. Students wouldn't have to have a whole new way of doing problem and project-based learning and performance tasks and inquiry as they move throughout our system. It would have real continuity as they move through the grade levels. Through Defined STEM, students will experience authentic problem-based learning throughout their time in Rockford Public Schools, as well as exposure to a variety of career opportunities which can be used to leverage connections to our academies at the high school level. Argument-driven inquiry would also provide students with opportunities to engage in truly authentic science lab experiences in the same way that actual scientists do, by being guided through a process which allows them to design their own investigation around a question for the purpose of gathering evidence, rather than simply following lab directions to come to a result they already know is going to come. In addition, both argument-driven inquiry and Defined STEM experiences provide students with really authentic opportunities to engage in inquiry through reading, writing, and argumentation, which would provide them with valuable opportunities to practice those really important skills in actual authentic contexts. The total cost for this adoption for middle school and high school would be $164,831.28. Defined STEM would be $141,600 for a 3-year license for the resource, the professional development, and their task customization. Argument-driven inquiry has a cost of $4,531.28 for the teacher ebooks, and an additional $18,700 for the professional development for the resource for teachers. Implementation would be monitored through our curriculum implementation leaders, which are in the middle school and high schools. We would want to gather feedback from teachers and students and discuss that at our monthly curriculum implementation leader meetings in order to determine what additional professional development needs there may be, as well as any resource gaps that may need to be addressed. In addition, we would monitor the program using formative and summative assessment data, our district focus skill assessments, our district's curriculum audit, and the Illinois Science Assessment, which is given both at the end of 8th grade and biology in high school. Without the purchase of a new resource, our new curriculum will not be implemented uniformly throughout the district. A shift to inquiry-based instruction aligned with the next generation science standard is a major shift for teachers, and without instructional support for developing these types of lessons, implementation has been very challenging. These materials will provide teachers with strong, high-quality instructional tools, which will allow for full implementation of the curriculum and the standards. We plan to provide reports on the progress of our implementation and success of our resources in the fall and spring of the 2019-20 school year and as needed thereafter. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Comments or questions for Dave? Mr. Connor.
The first is that this is probably a better example than I did on the music side, but it seems to me like you could have metrics on the next gen and say, you know, in 2016, here are our results, now it's 2020 or 2019 or whatever, and here's the difference. That would show pretty concretely the difference.
Very much so. Our district-focused skill assessments we would give 3 times a year, and they really measure students' ability to gather evidence, ask questions, and formulate an argument, which is really what these resources are really getting students to try to do. And our state assessments in 8th grade and then in biology would also measure those things as well as the content standards associated with
So
them.
we should essentially be able to do a before and after on this.
Yes, yes,
So this is obviously focused on the S in STEM.
yes.
So I assume that we're going to have similar kinds of things around the T, for example, and especially the M to do.
I think one of the really nice things about Defined STEM in particular as a resource, although it's also embedded in argument-driven inquiry, is they have worked those things into that resource itself. So there's technology components, and actually math has a lot of really strong connections in both resources. Students solve authentic problems as engineers when relevant using the science and math content. So these resources have actually done a really nice job of incorporating all of that into them. One of the other really nice things about Define STEM is their building licenses and not teacher licenses. So it's a resource that could be utilized once we really kind of start using it in our system in areas other than science long-term if we chose to.
I mean, I think, again, the same advice, though, on the numbers, which is when you read your section G and the return on investment, again, it states, okay, this is what we're after, and it'd be the metrics that
Yes.
show that would be part of the deal. The only other thing I'll say is that it seems on the M part that a lot of this are around some practical things on statistics and all that. So I'm assuming that there's some of that part that is going to be, you're implying that it's kind of integrated, some of the other pieces?
Yeah.
So something like a stats, which would help support, I would think, a lot of the argument-based. And by the way, I did read that article, and it was great because I couldn't sleep that night, so, but I did read it, yeah.
All right, thank you. Mr.
No
Rollins.
offense, but the article itself was.
So have we aligned our curriculum to the next generation science standards at this point?
That's what we're currently working on right now. Our middle school science curriculum has been aligned to the next generation science standards that we have rolled out. Biology is aligned to the next generation science standards we're rolling out this year. Our Integrated Science 1 and Chemistry course rolling out next year, that is what that team is currently working on. So we're currently in the process of that alignment now.
And because I actually hadn't heard of NGSS before last week, somebody asked me about it. What exactly is it? I mean, how is it different than?
Sure. I think probably the biggest difference between the next generation science standards and the previous Illinois standards is it's really more about students interacting with the science content and the way scientists and engineers do, more than just memorizing the content. So we really, the content really is pretty much the science content that that's always been taught, although they have streamlined it a little bit more. And rather than being just about the memorization of content, the focus is really more on the conceptual understanding of it. Because what we really want students to do is to understand the science well enough to use it in their lives, to use it to form arguments, to use it to solve problems. Which is why the inquiry piece is really important, because we don't want students just memorizing things they've read in a textbook. We want them really interacting with the content in a meaningful way to both build that understanding and be able to build some of those practices that scientists use, like analyzing data and arguing and things of that nature.
Mr. Siegel.
As a parent who had an elementary student who got steeped in STEM and now a middle schooler who's still steeped in it, I think it's really great that we are talking about the students getting absorbed in STEM. Can you talk to me about how we are training and preparing the teachers at the secondary level to make this shift?
Absolutely. We would be, and these resources in particular, we would have training for both the resources as well as the new curriculum that is rolling out and that actually has rolled out already. We would be doing a lot of that at Institute Day. We also have curriculum implementation leaders in our building who are really there as a support to help and guide those teachers through a lot of the shifts in instruction. So they have a teacher in the building who sort of works very closely to kind of become really grounded in the new practices and the new curriculum. And then that support's really in the building as they can work with teachers in their PLC and things of that nature to help improve that. One of the things I like about these resources in particular with the implementation of that is they do provide a lot of guidance for teachers on how to do these things. So instead of just saying we want students designing their own labs, we have a framework that they can work with to do that that's a little more structured and provide some guidance. And both of these resources have even things like instructional videos that teachers can kind of watch as quick tutorials even to walk them through what these things could look like in their classroom.
Any other board questions or comments? Okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
And Ben, you're next. Integrated Math 2 resource adoption.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So I am here to present a resource adoption for Integrated Math 2, which is the next step in our high school math pathway. Many of you know that the Integrated Math 1 rolled out as a new course, new curriculum this year in high school math. We are now ready to implement that new curriculum for Integrated Math 2 next year as new curriculum, but it needs a supporting resource. So a little bit of background and context. So in 2017, there was a 9 to 12 math task force that analyzed our existing high school math pathway. And at that time, with their analysis, they recommended changing that high school pathway to an integrated math approach, which basically just takes the old topics of algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and integrating them together in 1 year of math for 3 continuous years. Then later in 2017, a teacher-led resource evaluation was conducted, and they looked at 3 national publishers of resources of an integrated math approach, and they made a recommendation for a publisher called CPM. Instructional Council then reviewed that recommendation, and in 2018 approved both the integrated math pathway and also the utilization of that CPM resource to accompany that structure. So since then, the Integrated Math 2 curriculum leadership team has been created, and they've started designing that curriculum, which is now ready to roll out for next year. But they've been utilizing the CPM text as kind of their base and their structure for that work. So we have a couple alternative choices that obviously we could take. We could start just by using current district resources. The current second step of our high school pathway is for geometry, which is a text called Geometry for Enjoyment and Challenge, which is just as exciting as the name suggests. But it is not an aligned approach to integrated mathematics because it treats geometry as a separate silo and a separate topic, and that's not integrated. So that would go against our adopted integrated math pathway. The alternative choice number 2, we could go with another publisher, not CPM, but obviously that would contradict all of the group's recommendations that preceded the math task force, the teacher resource evaluation, and instructional council's recommendations. I should also note that CPM did score higher than all the other national publishers on the rubrics during that evaluation process. And then another kind of point about this alternative is that I believe it would waste an opportunity for vertical alignment if we went this route, because CPM text is currently being used in Integrated Math 1, and so if we continued and adopted CPM for the Integrated Math 2 step, we would have some vertical alignment for our students. So the solution that I'm presenting here is CPM's text, which is called Core Connections Integrated 2 for the second step of our Integrated Math pathway. The total cost for that adoption would be just under $209,000, but that would include a number of things. It would include hardcover textbooks for every student in the course. It would cover teacher edition binders for every teacher that we have teaching that course. There's also some Spanish volumes. Parent guides would be available for supporting purposes. We also would get math manipulatives called algebra tile sets for every single classroom that's implementing Integrated Math 2. We would also get 8 years of digital access to their online ebooks so they could access all of the materials through a browser. And then we also get a pretty robust professional development package, which involves 8 days of teacher training throughout the course of the year, and also 2 coaching days where coaches come into the classroom, observe, and then debrief with the teacher. So in addition to the objective metrics that you see that we could use to assess the situation, we also do have the structure that David previously talked about called Curriculum Implementation Leaders, where we can gather feedback from teachers and see how things are going. On a monthly basis, I meet with them, and we can determine if additional professional development is needed or if we need to make midstream corrections with teacher groups. So those are ways that we can certainly assess in addition to all of these testing measures and metrics. So as far as ROI, this text would really allow us to fully implement the second step of our integrated math pathway, and it would allow the teachers the support and the resource that they would use on a day-to-day basis to create that vertical alignment between those steps that we need. I'm committed to reporting back to Instructional Council during the fall and spring of the 2019-2020 school year, or more if necessary. But that's kind of a feedback loop that we can use. Thank you for your time.
Questions or comments for Ben? Mr. Connor?
Do you mean pathways literally as part of the academy, or are you using pathways differently?
I'm using Pathway as a course sequence.
Okay.
So Integrated Math 1, you have to take that course first, then 2.
Right. So on the integrated math, so if I look at the top line one on your integrated math student pathways, I'm assuming that there's some equivalent on that top line so that, for example, again, either stats or, I don't know, college algebra or whatever, those things. So this is really, the only ones you actually called out were the stats and calculus, which made me wonder, if there was a particular order to the others and why you didn't call those out, so.
There's no order to those.
Oh, okay.
So after you finish Integrated Math 1, Integrated Math 2, Integrated Math 3, if a student elects to take a 4th year of math, there's a variety of options that they can take at that point.
Yeah. I mean, because usually, I'm sorry to be in the mindset of prerequisites, but I would have thought for math in particular, you'd have certain things that you'd have to know to go to the next. That's why I was curious.
Yeah,
What I'm hearing is that in the integrated math itself, it will hit the topics it needs to hit so that they'd have the skills. So essentially, they know their prerequisites by the time they made that another choice, okay.
Yeah.
It's just this picture, sorry to be confused, that did not come across.
Okay,
so.
I apologize.
That's all right, no, not your fault. I was just curious, because.
Any other board member comments or questions for Ben?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so these, all 4 of these will come back to us on the 12th. We're going to move right along because we are getting reports that road conditions are absolutely horrible. So Dr. Jarrett is going to present the building capacity and academic return on investment from DMG Group.
Okay, thank you. So this proposal really ties in what I hope is going to be a conversation about things that we are spending a lot of time and effort on, and it really ties down to getting better results in Goal 1. So if you look at every single year and the accumulation of all those years, we literally have hundreds of different initiatives right now that are designed to get us better results on Goal 1. And one of the problems we're really trying to solve here is we don't do a great job of evaluating on the front end or on the back end what is working and what is not working. All of those initiatives have 2 major costs. They cost time and money, and all of those initiatives are designed to help either all students or some segment of students. But this really is all about getting better as an organization at measuring what is working on the front end. That's really what we're hoping to accomplish. There are really 2 groups we want to build capacity with in order to do this work, and there are 2 separate work streams that this proposal covers. One group is, as a district office, we do a lot of district-wide initiatives that tie to Goal 1, and we want to make sure our district departments and our respective non-academic departments as well build our capacity to make sure we're budgeting around that principle. The second group, the second work stream is we have 41 buildings that do building budgets, and we want to make sure our principals are able to really excel at making site-based budgets. So those are the 2 big groups we want to build capacity. And that really comes down to 4 huge processes that we do annually, or in some cases every couple weeks, or in one case every 5 years. Our district budgets, our school budgets, our PDSAs, you saw 4 of those tonight, and our 20 to 25 strategic plan. Our last one was in 2015. All 4 of these core processes, all of these are going to be things we do anyways. What I hope to convince you of tonight is that the work on this proposal will help us improve in all 4 of these existing processes and make them much more effective as a district, and ultimately, as a result, have us get better results in Goal 1, which ties to growth and attainment. So the first core process, we spend over $400 million as an organization every year, and there are really 3 factors that are impacted when we talk about goal 1 of our strategic plan. Again, we're looking at what segments of students are impacted in that budget, how much time and money does it cost to get the impact with those students, and ultimately, how are we going to measure success? So what we hope to accomplish in this work is to get to the point where at least 3 significant projects per year that make up that budget that are very closely tied to goal 1 are analyzed. Second core process I wanted to talk to you about is we will be getting ready to do a 5-year strategic plan. What this proposal will allow us to do is it's essentially do a virtual cleaning of the closet. Before we start talking about what we want to do for the next 5 years, this proposal includes what's called an initiative inventory. And we will literally gather all of the initiatives that we are spending money on across the district with a hyper focus on goal 1, and we will look at the impact on students, time and money, and achievement on those initiatives. We will essentially be able to give a sense of what we are spending our time and our money on before we start with new ideas. One of the big things that really goes wrong with strategic plans is they tend to be you add on new stuff without going back and creating a stop-doing list. Essentially what we're going to do, I believe if this proposal passes, better than we've ever done before, is we'll build a stop-doing list. We'll start talking about, are there some things we're going to stop doing? Are there some things we need to retool before we just start adding in the new strategic plan? Because there's a tendency to add, as we all experience. The third area that we're going to improve is with what we see tonight. Tonight alone, you had $600,000 in spending that went through the PDSA process. You'll notice every single one of those initiatives was tied, with the exception of the very first one, was tied directly to improving Goal 1. And every single one of those initiatives, we used something called opportunity costs to evaluate. Essentially, those were all in a 5-year curriculum cycle. We're going to come back and analyze how they're working, but what we aren't as good as we want to be yet is looking at specifically which students, specifically how much time and money, and what the actual measure of achievement. We were better than others depending on the different proposals, but I think as an organization, we have an opportunity to get better. Every time we present something tied to Goal 1, I want us to do a better job of being really clear about what students are going to be helped, how much time and money, not just how much the textbook costs, but how much staff time, how much professional development time. A lot of that gets covered in one way or another, but I think we can get better at that and ultimately tying it to moving the needle on Goal 1. And then finally, we have 41 schools, and those individual site budgets vary from $3 to $15 million. Mr. Cotter, you requested that handout. Email has been down, so I haven't been able to share that with everyone. I have received it from Ms. Yar, but I have been unable to forward it on to the board. Mr. Connor requested kind of a breakdown of school-by-school budget during our individual phone call that we had. But if you think about it, we're going to do this, and the largest investment in those school budgets is staffing, largely. There are some other opportunities. This need to build capacity in our principals as they work with their faculty to set really intentional, high-quality school budgets is the fourth process we can improve. So again, the solution, in my opinion, with this proposal is really about taking 4 things we are going to do to really allocate how we're going to spend our time and our money to improve Goal 1 and get better at all 4 of them. We'll get better at the budget. We'll get better at school budgets, all 41 of them. We'll get better at every PDSA that comes forward, specifically those that are tied to Goal 1. And when we go into this huge strategic plan that sets the big priorities for the district, we're going to get way better at that, too, by cleaning out the closet before we move forward, by deciding what we're going to strategically abandon or change before we start adding new stuff, which is historically what happens. Here's a little graphic that gives you a sense of what this looks like. And again, it's the same thing I'm talking about. What student segments are going to be served? How do we break the students down? Not every initiative is for every student. Some are for very targeted group of students. Tonight we saw some elective courses. We saw a math course sequence. It's really important that we're really clear on which students we're helping. Then we look at the student outcomes. What on the front end is going to be the measurement of success. And then finally, fully loaded costs. I keep talking about time and money. I think we're pretty good about talking about how much money something costs. I don't think we're anywhere near as good as we need to be as an organization about the direct and indirect costs, specifically time. You can have something that's relatively inexpensive in terms of cash, but if it's a huge drain on time and resources, that can really damage us. We get to that sometimes when we talk about opportunity costs, but I think we need to be better as an organization. And this is the academic return on investment framework that District Management Group has provided. Again, there are two work streams. The first work stream is the one we're going to do to improve our district's capacity. That's where we're going to get into the district budget, the strategic plan, and every PDSA we bring forward. That's where we're going to build our capacity as an organization. We're going to go from being somewhat imprecise on what students we're helping to very precise. We're going to go from often excluding the impact on staff time to being very clear on what it really costs all in. We're going to go from somewhat unclear at times measurement of student outcomes to being very clear on how students will be impacted and what success will look like on the front end rather than the back end. Second work stream that you saw in the proposal was tied to school capacity. How do we make our principals and our buildings better equipped to get the most bang from their buck for their $3 to $15 million budgets? Academic ROI is ultimately going to complement student-based budgets, or the student budgeting process, the school-based budgeting, excuse me. Control federal dollars is a step we took this year and over the last year as well. They're starting to do that. In strategic budgeting, they're going to control all the dollars in some way or another. Very small percentage of the budget, although it's much bigger this year than it's been in the past. Ms. Yar and her team have done an amazing job. I think some buildings are going to control more like $700,000 or $800,000 additional, but so much of their budget is staffing. This is going to really get a sense of how those budget numbers all can tie together to get better results. I think we really haven't trained principals historically to do site-based budgeting work. If you go to graduate school, it's not something that's covered. It's not something that is a capacity we build in at this time, nor do we have the expertise to train our principals to the extent that we want to. We have some expertise, but I think we need more, and so we're going to do some really significant training over the next 2 budget cycles. And we've gone from 2 or 3 years ago, principals feeling very little autonomy. We've definitely made progress in this budget cycle, and you'll see that, but we really want to maximize them feeling that sense of autonomy. We're going to hold them accountable for getting really good results, so we need to give them the capacity to do something with those extra dollars and give them the autonomy to make those choices themselves. We had alternative choices. We could have attempted to do it ourselves. I think this is the most logical thing. Don't spend the money, just figure it out on your own. I would not be standing here if I felt we had the capacity. I feel like my own capacity and our team's capacity collectively needs to be built in this area before we can help our principals and all of our departments. I think we are much better than we used to be because of the PDSA cycle. I think our budgeting process has gotten better. I think we have improved in these areas. I think we are going to hit a limit on what we can accomplish without bringing in some expertise. And I think our urgency demands that we get better at this work specifically. Another thing we could do is we could delay implementation until the FY21 budget. That was a lot of conversation we had at the cabinet level. We feel like it's really important this year for DMG to get started. There's 2 reasons for that. One, they can do a lot of observing us right now and work with a coalition of the willing at the end of this budget cycle so we can really hit the ground running in FY21. And I think that is a really, really important piece. 2, we have some unique one-time dollars through Illinois Empower that can help fund at least a percentage of this work for this year. And this can be, I believe, 100% grant-funded work. We will make sure before the final approval is up at the next board meeting that we lay that out specifically for you. Dr. Wolf is still working with DMG to make sure what percentage of the dollars can come from our specific Illinois Empower dollars. We want to make sure we are not diverting resources to do this work and to avoid that as much as possible. Finally, we could just tie this into the strategic planning process and wait for that work. I really feel like it's important to build this capacity first and not to wait to do a new strategic plan to say, hey, because I think if we don't do this work, we wait for the plan, I think we're going to come back around to the conclusion, gosh, we really need to know if what we're doing is working before we make new plans, and this capacity building is necessary. Here is the cost. Again, we will primarily fund it through Illinois Empower funds, $257,500 each of the 2 fiscal years, total of $515,000. Workstream 1 is $240,000. That covers all of the district capacity building. $275,000 covers all of the capacity building at the building level for Workstream 2. So just to give you a sense of how this could be, tonight we talked about $600,000 of expenditures, just tonight alone at a committee of the whole meeting. This is a $515,000 contract. I do not take this big of an ask lightly. I'm personally presenting this myself, although I've had a ton of help from the cabinet every step of the way, and particularly Michelle Yar has been very involved in this work. But at the end of the day, if you're looking at $515,000 contract, $600,000 on the line, if we ultimately found over the course of projects 3 programs that we were going to strategically abandon that were diverting resources away from something that would work, that alone would come out ahead $85,000. And we are committing to doing 3 of those studies per year. And many of the things we will study are much bigger investments than $200,000. Tonight's proposals, frankly, were pretty low cost. Our textbook budget alone, every year we invest over $2 million in initiatives that are tied to improving Goal 1. Every year we do that, and it's a 5-year cycle. So these are huge, huge investments. I want to make sure we're better at making those investments. And if something isn't working, we need to either get it better or stop doing it so we can use those dollars to do something else. I don't think we have that capacity to the extent we need to yet. So again, we can either abandon, redesign, or celebrate things that are working really well. Again, there are 4 proposals that you're going to be able to constantly see. One of the things I love about this proposal, there's no hiding on this one. There's no, we'll see you in 6 months and see if it, after we build capacity during the course of this year, it will be a soft rollout, but as we go into the FY21 budget cycle, you will see the initiative inventory as part of the strategic planning process. You will see in the district budget the programs that we have analyzed and decided whether to abandon or redesign. You will see in every board proposal moving forward that's tied to Goal 1, once we build this capacity, you will be able to see, gosh, instead of seeing opportunity cost over and over again, which is what you see now when we get to the ROI section, you will see academic ROI. You will see what students it's helping. You will see the time and money in a way that we don't have the capacity to do now. And finally, and I think this is the most urgent, is school budgets. The $3 to $15 million budgets that we are spending money on every year and the school scorecards we put in place are essential to moving the needle on student achievement. Every school has to engage in that work, and we want to build their capacity to be highly strategic in their budgeting, and Workstream 2 does that. So again, you're going to see this with the school scorecard. You're going to see it with programs and things that we abandon in each fiscal year. You'll start to see it in FY20, but moving forward, you'll see it every year. PDSAs, you're going to see it with those that are tied to Goal 1, and you're going to see it with all the initiatives we abandoned going, or that we analyzed going into the new strategic plan. So with that, I want to turn it over for questions, but I really believe this is an important investment of our time and effort, and I think the return on investment, ironically, is there for this proposal.
Okay. I'm going to go first. Can you talk a little bit about the history of our relationship as a district with DMG, what they've done for us in the past? So we do have some history with them.
Thank you. Yes, we do. We have two different proposals. The return on investment in the first proposal is still trickling in, but I can tell you that one idea alone more than paid for our first investment when we looked at analyzing how we provide student support services. The biggest takeaway from our first partnership with DMG came down to analyzing the use of kindergarten paraprofessionals. Okay. There was about a $1.6 million return on investment, and based on what we've seen on our MAP scores at that level, it does seem to be encouraging from a student achievement standpoint. That was a huge takeaway. We're also still looking at how we can increase the amount of student contact time with counselors, social workers, and others through that. The second work stream we've done is they have been helping us, and that's part of why we knew we needed to build the capacity on our work with principals, is through the Elementary Innovation Zone project that they've been working with us. We really saw that many schools were interested in having more flexibility with their site-based budgets, but a lot of attention was needed to that. And so as we saw a few schools here and there drop out of the innovation zone work, we definitely still have some that are hanging in there. Those that have stayed along, I think, have really built their capacity. That one, we can't tell because this is still the planning year, and we won't be able to measure the impact until we see how many schools stay in it, and also what the ultimate long-term impact is from that innovation. But I think we did learn very clearly during the training that our principals have very high level of willingness to get better at this work, but they lack the training that they would need to really excel at it.
My second question is, I know you're pretty confident that the funds would come out from Illinois Empower money or whatever, but what if that didn't happen? What would your plan be?
If that does not happen, first of all, I'm completely confident that the majority of the funds will come from Illinois Empower. We will have the specifics prior to the next board meeting, but if they don't, Title II is also eligible to supplement the funds, so it would be something that we'd be able to make that investment. So this will be grant funded, and the nice thing about this investment is, while it is a heavy 2-year investment, the design of this proposal is to have zero reoccurring costs other than any capacity building we do in the district to add personnel or investments to ensure that this is sustainable moving forward.
Okay. Mr. Siegel, I thought you were about ready to push your button a second ago, so I'll let you go next.
Oh, I think I'm going to be pushing some buttons. I'm sorry. I will try to keep this fairly short, but I got a ton of questions, and they kind of reflect just a lack of knowledge on what some of these things mean. Can you explain to me what a precise student segment is and how it's measured?
So take tonight. Tonight we learned that the algebra students, the integrated math students, there's a very precise segment of students. There are students that are in an honors track that is not serving. There are students that are getting really special services that are not, a really small group of kids that are not getting those services. So there's about probably 60% of the freshman class that's served. I don't think we are as good as we need to be yet about being very precise about what student segment is served. So that would be one example. Another thing you could look at is something as simple at the building level of a very specific reading tutorial program or a mandatory tutoring program for students that are failing a course. Student segments are all about being very precise on not just, hey, these will help some students, it'll help this exact group of students, which helps you measure the outcomes much more effectively.
Okay. One of the things that you talked about was weeding out of programs, essentially creating a stop doing list. Who is going to be responsible for making sure that we stop doing those things? Will DMG go in and be the heavy on that, or is that someone from administration?
No, our DMG's job is to basically, if you look in your proposal in sections, let's see, I'll give you the actual page numbers here. There's 6A, B, C, and D, which is the initiative inventory. They help us build the prototype, help us gather the list of initiatives. They help us look at where the gaps are between what we want to do and what we're actually doing with our money, and then finalize the list. It is up to us to have the political will, and ultimately it's up to the board to make a decision, or administration recommending to the board what our stop doing list is. Their job is to help us have a really great process for collecting that list of initiatives and really effectively measuring what is and is not working. It is not their job to say, don't do that. But I believe it will be evident by the time we finalize what things that we should either stop doing, or in many cases, it's not that you stop doing it, it's that you make sure you do what you were doing in a way that gets better results. So you retool or you tweak things. Very, very rarely, if ever, is something a totally bad idea. It comes down to how effectively are you implementing programs. I would venture that very rarely, if ever, do we build things forward that can't work. And sometimes the real issue is how well are we implementing it. And so this will not only measure a little bit, maybe if things are not the best idea, but mostly it's going to be what are we not doing well enough, and some of it's because we just need to stop doing it because it competes with something, but some things might just need to be retooled.
Will some of the curriculum proposals that come to us also get filtered by DMG even before they get to us?
They will be available during this fiscal year to work with to work with folks on the front end, and then moving forward during the FY21 year, as we are still building our own internal capacity, they will be a resource to work through anything that's tied to Goal 1 that we bring forward. So, for example, all 4 of the 5 tonight would have been good candidates for support on the PDSA process. So we would have them as a resource to do that. Now, I want to be clear, if this passes, on the next board meeting, you're not going to see every single thing perfectly done. It's going to take us it's an 18-month process to build our capacity, but what I think you can expect reasonably is the further we get into that 18-month timeline, the more consistently you'll see people across the organization doing that work. This summer in particular will be a heavy training time as things lighten up a little bit, and I think you'll start to see really, really heavy levels of deployment as we get into the FY21 PDSAs.
Okay, and I think you may have answered this, but will DMG do any of the principal training, or will that still be the responsibility of the administration to provide that?
They will do the vast majority of the principal training. We will have administrative people. I know Ms. Yar and her team will be very involved. Dr. Vosberg and Ms. Kirschbaum and Ms. Dr. Saltis and their teams that are supervising principals will be involved. We'll have very active engagement from district office people, but DMG has the capacity to do the work on the front end. For example, if you look at the proposal on work stream 2, they lead us through what's called they facilitate a strategic budgeting simulation exercise. And principals actually experience a very high-level simulation of the pros and cons of how you address dollars. The vast majority of this work is going to be very directive. And then the idea is, over time, we increasingly build our capacity, so by the end of the FY21 budget cycle, we're ready to do it on our own.
Okay. I got a couple more, and again, this is just things I don't quite understand. Will there actually be some change in measuring student outcomes? Will we continue to use MAP and IAR to determine what, if these are actually successful initiatives?
So it's an excellent question, and part of the reason we have not brought this forward prior to this point, this is work I've been familiar with for a while. We had to build the capacity on our financial side, and we've done that under Ms. Jar's team's work to really make sure we are really clear about our ability to measure the time and cost of things. And we also had to build significant capacity on our data integrity and really get clear on measurement. So by us adding a school scorecard system and the board being very clear on what success looks like with Goal 1 and having very clear metrics, that is really a precursor for this work being successful. Because if we're all randomly picking what variables or measurements we think are most important, that would be a recipe for failure. We really want to be focused on the current metrics we use and tying them to success that will help schools improve as well as the district improve. And so you will see very, very clear adherence to existing data protocols. We weren't ready to do that to the level I would have liked prior to, and we're still not 100% there, but I think our data warehouse work really is paving the way to make this possible. Without that, I wouldn't feel comfortable spending this money because of the data integrity issues.
Okay, I have three more things. I'm sorry that, this is a bad night to have this many questions. But you just mentioned data collection protocols. Can you explain those to me a little bit better? That was one of the things I just didn't understand that well.
Which part of data collection?
Actually, the entire term. Your data collection protocols, does that mean you're still just relying on your map tests and your IAR or is that something that's happening day to day in the classroom?
So you will see, things that we will tie success to largely will be metrics on the lag in terms of the things that we're ultimately the board is going to care the most about. You're going to see things tied to SAT, to perhaps AP results, to MAP results, to IAR results, all of those things. You will also see, however, tied to improving attendance, perhaps. You could see something tied to improving failure rates. There are anything that would move the needle on our school scorecards or on our district work would be fair game, or perhaps you would even see some even more precise, more leading measures that could be tied to local assessments. It's certainly possible that, for example, tonight's integrated math proposal, there could be what's called a type 2 assessment, a district-created, not a nationally created assessment where there's a fall to spring to winter. It certainly would not be out of the realm of possibility to measure success as it ties to how we perform on a local assessment as well. But I think most of the time this is going to be about improving failure rates, and this is going to be about improving standardized test scores, improving attendance, reducing things that we want to see less of, and improving things that we want to see more of.
You just gave me a bunch of other questions. I'll just email them to you. I do have just one more that I'll ask. As I was going through this, I kept thinking about the alignment that we were talking about towards the end of the last semester, where we were taking information that was based upon information gathered directly from each individual student and moving forward. And when I saw the things, it was like student segments, I thought, well, we have already talked about something that's actually not even be a segment, it's just going to be a student point, where teachers are going to be able to create such student-level differentiation. And when you get that specific, it seems like it would be fairly easy to start looking at what is available for those students and say, this will work, this won't work, where we have the adults in the room who are going to be most in tune with what the student needs. Can we actually differentiate and deliver what the student needs based on that?
Sure. So I think those are two separate things. I think we want teachers and teams of teachers to be doing their own data analysis, problem-solving teams, what are called professional learning communities, or PLCs that are organized as content or grade-level teams. That work needs to happen, and this is not meant to replace that. What this is really about are those four systems and processes that I mentioned before. Individual teachers aren't going to evaluate our district's initiatives going into a strategic plan. Individual teachers are typically not by themselves bringing forward a multi-$100,000 or even multi-million-dollar spend on a new curriculum initiative. They may be part of that process, but they're not. Individual teachers are typically, so I think what you're describing is essential to our success in building our capacity, but this is really about those four processes I talked about getting better. PDSAs that come before you for board spend, our annual budget, our site-based budgets, and at the building level, and finally that strategic plan. So I think both need to happen, to answer your question.
Thank you. If I could just make one more comment, I'm sorry. I was viewing this contract rather dubiously, as I think you kind of guessed from our conversation the other day. But I guess as long as I understand that the work that's going to be done and measurements that we're already familiar with are going to continue, I'm feeling a little bit better about this. This feels like it's more of just a cleaning house and efficiency initiative, and the urgency that we are trying to impress upon the administration doesn't really get pushed out any because of this.
You nailed it. This is not new. This is about, you really gave a great summary, and it makes me feel like, it makes me feel good to hear that, because ultimately, this is about us doing what we do, and we have limited time, and we have limited money. Okay, we do not have unlimited amounts of those, and I think sometimes we just focus on the limits of money and we forget how the limited time thing really hurts us, right? And so if we have urgency, I want to quote our friend board member Escobedo on this, if we truly have urgency, time and money is really all we have to move the needle. Our people's time and the money we spend. And I think what this will do is give us organizational discipline to move towards maximizing our time and our money faster than we could do without this proposal. I don't think it is a new initiative. I think it's taking what we do and making sure we're getting the most out of our time and money.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rollins?
Yeah, I just had two sort of questions and comments that I'm not really looking for responses on tonight because I don't want to hold us up, just be thinking about it. So I am sitting here thinking, the focus here, reading through this, really is on the budgeting process, but just thinking about the presentations that we had tonight, the presentations we had tonight were for resources that were necessary to support decisions that had been made previously that were non-budget decisions, curriculum decisions. And so I think that somehow we have to, if we're going to have this culture of academic return on investment, that's a discussion that has to occur even before budgeting.
Yes.
Because we make a lot of decisions here that then have flow through the decisions into the budget. So we have to figure out how to do that. And then related, and this is a little bit related to something that Mr. Siegel was talking about, I mean, sure, individual teachers don't make decisions, but I think they're important to the process.
Yes.
They're involved in these curriculum decisions. And I'm trying to get a grasp on, we've talked about sort of inculcating the downtown administration, doing the principals, what's the next step, how do we do this with the teachers as a whole, and I don't know if that's going to be through the principals, with the principal, if we train the principals, whether they then have those discussions and sort of try to bring the teachers through in on it, or whether we should be doing any direct discussions with the teachers.
Excellent. I think if you look at those four processes, and I'll be quick because I know you didn't want a long answer here because everyone wants to get home safely. Strategic planning, we're going to have teacher voice as part of that. As we review our initiatives, we'll want teacher voice there. Building budgets. This strategic budgeting process is all about building principal capacity to include teachers in that, because ultimately teacher time and money is what we've got. I had a great conversation with one of our elementary principals, and I was excited to talk to her about the $500,000 of new money she was going to have to spend. She had the number 3.186 million written on a piece of paper, and she said, that's the number I'm excited about. That's the money I'm already spending on my teachers. The time and effort of those teachers is so important for us to leverage. So I think we leverage teachers' expertise in that regard. I think if you look at every PDSA that comes forward, we have collaborative systems and processes we built to include teachers in those decisions. And so as they are part of those collaborative processes to bring a textbook recommendation through instructional council, academic ROI will become part of the conversation as it comes up through a democratic process that the teachers are very involved in. So I think every single one of those four core processes I described have to be supported by teachers. I just wanted to make it clear that individual teachers don't have to become academic ROI experts by themselves. They can be part of democratic systems and processes. This is not going to be the new PD initiative that we're going to drop on teachers. This will be something that they will have the opportunity to be part of if they choose to be part of any of those four very, very important processes that we talked about tonight.
Do you have anything else, Tim? Okay. Mr. Escobedo?
Yeah, I've got a couple quick questions and then comments, since I maybe got a different approach to this. First of all, let me excuse myself saying, I don't mean to be argumentative, but I do have a slightly different take on this. So I've been thinking about it a little more after our discussion. But how long, if this was to be approved, how long before you start implementing changes?
We would commit to, and you can see in the proposal, we would commit to up to 3 significant studies per year of existing programming. That's how it would start to impact the budget. The strategic planning initiative inventory would start almost immediately so that we'd be ready to have that going into the new strategic plan. Site-based budgets would be consultative immediately, but because those are much of the way done, it wouldn't impact them as much this year as it would next year, just because of sheer timing. And then again, it will take time to train staff, so you will see more and more of next year's PDSAs, but you will start to see immediate opportunities.
I just thinking of like student outcome, how long before we would start seeing impact on students? Whether you've eliminated programs because they're not working,
Right.
or you've expanded programs because they do seem to be working.
So in this fiscal year, we could do up to 3 I think we could, in a full year, you could do up to 3. I don't know how many we can get done in 1 year, in this abbreviated year. But next, the FY21, I think we would commit to a minimum of 3 significant studies of either looking backwards or forward. I think you would see, as you look at the next year, initiatives tied to Goal 1, like you saw tonight, would start to exclusively be tied to academic ROI on the front end. The strategic planning process will be starting as early as next fall, and so, because we want to have that ready for the 2020 school year. So that work will start as early as this summer. So you will see all of that work, and I tied some of that in the PDSA, the written version of it. You can see a little more specifics on the timelines.
Okay, all right, so I guess I'll just make my comments, and the reason, I'll make some general comments here, but the reason why I want to make some comments is because unfortunately I don't think I'll be able to support this. The reason being is, if this is as critical as it is made to be, then this should have been brought to us, before. If this has that much impact on academic achievement, then the way I see it, if it was urgent, that should have been brought to us a year ago. Second, do we really need DMG or someone, a consulting group to tell us what is working and what is not? I mean, so for example, we had math growth. What happened with Lathrop, second grade growth? We've got a lot of bright spots, and I think that this could potentially become more of a distraction. And my concern is that we're not focusing. My concern is that you can keep throwing money, you can keep throwing consultants at the issue, but we're still not digging into the issues and addressing engagement, rigor, and consistency in every single classroom. So we've had a multi-year classroom initiatives. We've had the innovation zones. We had other things that we know already are working, and I'm sure if we talk to other folks in the district, they'll tell us many things that are working, and we know certain schools that are had great success. So my point is, why aren't we spending time and effort in duplicating those initiatives that are already working, and instead of yet adding another initiative? Thirdly is, look at scores from 2015. We didn't have DMG back then, yet, we were 9 points away from the state average. Unfortunately, at this point, I think I'm concerned that we keep adding initiatives that may keep adding distractions and not allow us to focus. So I just want to provide a little of my background as to why I may not be able to support this. Okay. I'm all ears. If there's something I'm missing, I'm all ears and I can listen, but at this point, that's my take. Thank you.
Can I just add one comment, Mr. Chris? I just wanted to clarify that academic ROI is not really a budget, it's not designed to be a budget initiative. So really, academic ROI normally sits with the schools team and the academic side of the house because it's academic ROI. And yes, when we're spending our resources, we want to look at, that's our program. Our program is educating students. So we want to make sure that whatever we're spending our money on is really helping the academic side. It's hard because we call it ROI, that we assume that it's, on the finance side, but it really isn't. ROI is we could just talk about regular ROI if it was on the finance side of things. So we're really trying to gather that academic. When I started the budget cycle, just for a little background, because I wasn't able to present tonight, was in October, I tried to get a list of all the programs that we have. You would think that you could do that. It was very difficult to do that. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I wanted to see what things can we abandon, what things can we invest in, what's working. I talked to a lot of people. It took took some time, and I didn't mind doing that. But it just really brought to the light that we have so many initiatives, or people are spread so thin that it's really hard to focus on what really is working. So there are a lot of initiatives. I don't even really know how many we have. Dr. Monson has a list started, but we really, I think that would be beneficial to look at that list when we could gather that.
Thank you, Michelle. Mr. Connor?
Oh, mine's just a follow-up on an earlier one, and that was when you talked about the budget and training the principals. When I went through and read that, it said a cohort. It said it would be a select cohort of schools that would get that support.
Right. A select cohort will be supported by Illinois Empower dollars. That's written to ensure that we are not violating any grant protocols, and then we will have all schools involved in the work. It just depends on what percentage of those dollars can be funded by Illinois Empower versus what would have to be funded by a different grant source. That's why it's worded that way. You can't say all in the proposal and then run it through that way. So that's the main issue, is we have to be clear that those dollars are for schools that qualified for Illinois Empower funds, and but we will, from an implementation course, we'll do that work with other funding streams as necessary. That's why we'll have to give those specific weights to you at the next meeting.
Mr. Connor?
So if we need
I'm sorry.
extra time, if we need extra time for other schools that couldn't come out of a different budget, this all has to be out of Empower Illinois. I mean, it bothers me that there's going to be just select schools.
No, we will fund this 100% at the next board meeting and not wait. We are determining what percentage of those funds can be supported by these Illinois Empower dollars.
Okay. Mr. Connor, now you may go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. So I hear Mr. Escobedo's issues, and I know the clock is ticking in certain ways on the classroom side. So this initiative, the first thing I have to say is it's focusing on two areas, if I'll call it this, structurally. The first work stream is really the district side. Second work stream is really the principal side.
You got it.
We have identified the principals, and if any are listening, I don't mean this literally, but as a potential weak link in the actual implementation of some of this. And if one of our goals is to give principals the background and the framework to make them more successful, it would seem to me that that's something that we have made a high priority. So one of the initial things I'd say is, I hear what Mr. Escobedo is saying and totally understand it. I actually, when I looked at this, didn't think that this would interfere with what I'll call the blocking and tackling side on the education. What I looked at this was that one of the criticisms that's been here forever is that the administrative side has weaknesses. And one of the things that frankly I do like about this is that we have said right up front, we have some issues. We don't do certain things well. And I'm totally with this, that we do studies and all kinds of things where we spend money and we're really not sure what we get, and it seems frankly fruitless. What I like here is we've admitted there are certain things that we don't do especially well. And we are asking for outside help, specifically on the things we don't do well. We've given it a time limit of 2 years, and there is, from my point of view, a structural part. And I agree with Mrs. Yar, this is not exactly an ROI in a certain way, but it will help us budget better because we will know the outcomes better, as I'm assuming one of the outcomes. Particularly on the district side, that the focus, so there, it's about standards and direction. The principal side seems to me about that's where the implementation is. And if we admit we haven't done this well, and we certainly get enough criticism, by the way, from staff on that very point, then we need an answer for that. So I actually, in my view, we've admitted something, we've said, what can we do about it? And I like the fact that we have specific outcomes, the 4 budget parts, that we can go and have criteria for evaluation, and presumably criteria for evaluation over a good deal of time. So and I asked a number of questions on this, and had what I'm sure is a question, and I think Mrs. McCulloch was headed in this direction, and what I'll say is teacher engagement is a big part of this, and how does it affect them?
Yes.
And I think we do have to absolutely answer that, and just full transparency, I asked this question, so this is not new to the superintendent, me asking it, but I would say this is a lot of money, and the one thing I have told myself is it's always a lot of money. Whatever we do, it's always a lot of money. But where I'm encouraged is we have said we need help, and we've asked for it, and that's certainly one of the things that we've seen as pivotal, which are the principals and their ability to pull this along, is really a big part of it. So I'm just expressing why I actually, although it's a lot of money, it's like we have to have a leap of faith, and if this is really where we're headed and we've identified these, I would just say we do need to have specific answers so this is not a distraction. So this is integrated, it's really outcomes-based and all the rest. So I would say, for me, this is a leap of faith that, frankly, I'm willing to take as long as it doesn't become a distraction.
Thank you.
Okay. One more comment?
The English major in me insists on asking this, I'm sorry.
It's okay. If I made a mistake, I apologize.
No.
I think he used to teach English.
Yeah, I know. That's
Okay.
It actually has to do with the shortcoming. And you actually made me think about this. Is there an academic return on investment formula? Is there an equation?
Yes.
Is there any chance you could share it with me so I can just
I
ponder
emailed it to all of you.
It's in that article.
Yeah. It's in the article that I emailed you over the weekend or whatever.
I did read it, but apparently I glossed over the math part. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a formula.
There's a pretty simple formula.
Yeah, it's basically the growth expected and the number of students that will be affected by the project or plan or whatever divided by the cost. Correct?
That's it, but the all-in cost,
Right, yeah.
time and money, that's.
Right. So it is in the article that I sent you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if you have, sorry, Ms. McCullough.
Thank you. Dr. Jarrett, when we had our conversation with Nate, there was a term he used with regard to bringing people on board with their urgency about caring about this whole, I didn't bring my notes. And I'll tell you that I was really negative during that conversation, probably because so much, the linchpin was that people really cared about student outcomes, and that all the people involved were here because they cared about student outcomes, that this was all about the students. And my biggest concern is that our staff isn't always all about the students. There's a lot of concern about adults. And unless this group seems to think that they can bring everybody on board at that same level, I thought this administration could do that. I think there's a good relationship between the administration and the schools. I'm not sure what their magic is, but that is my biggest concern, is they are depending on that buy-in by the teachers and, our teaching staff, and we haven't gotten there so far. I don't know, again, what is it that they have that's so magic that's going to turn that tide and really make this all about students and not about adults.
I just want to add one more comment because, I think one of the things Mr. Escobedo has really brought to our board has been to always ask those hard questions like, how do you know this is the right tool in your toolbox? As one of the common things that we've heard. And another one, how do you know that this is going to be the program that is going to directly impact student achievement and those kinds of things? And I think this will be, and I'll just, the presentations tonight, we didn't get, Mr. Connor brought that up multiple times, so we need to see what the metrics are going to be. So we need to know how to measure. And I think our administrative, curriculum deans, whoever, they need the training and they need to understand how to come up with that formula to say this is the right tool that is going to work in our situation, or this is the right outcome that we're after, and this will have the greatest impact on. So makes sense to me, I guess. So thank you. Okay. Any other comments for the good?
I'm going to piggyback on what you just said about our curriculum deans coming forward, because, and I've already sent a note off on this, but I was really frustrated in having somebody read me executive summaries. I mean, I got those ahead of time.
Understand.
The third person who was up there giving us their presentation, articulated a summary of what was on the executive summary, didn't read me the summary.
Right, sure.
And I would like to suggest that our administrators work with the people who are bringing us presentations so that they're bringing it to us in their own words, and so that we have that, I was just really frustrated with that. Okay. So this isn't a read along.
No,
this is show us your expertise by giving us that piece.
Right,
so I just would make that request.
Good suggestion. Okay. All right, Mr. Rollins.
Just real quick, what's going on with the district's technology?
Oh, yeah.
We can use the old school technology of television if anybody's watching it. Come through the airwaves the old way. We will assume we are attempting to continue to keep people posted. I believe there is some type of a combination of a virus issue that is of concern. That what was explained to me is essentially recycling a series of repetitive tasks that is sucking up all the bandwidth, and we have engaged in a group that has the expertise, we believe, to help on a short-term contract to get the solution to get it fixed and come up with a solution as quickly as possible. But it is not, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess unfortunately, it isn't even just email that's impacted. It is also other core processes like Business Plus, et cetera. Essentially, a ton of bandwidth within the system and within our servers is being wasted to constantly cycle through these tasks that it does not able to do. So they're going to be working all through the night to try to get this thing fixed for tomorrow, but as of now, I do not have any guarantees that it's fixed yet.
Is that what took the website down on Sunday, or was that a separate issue?
I do not believe that issue is related. That was fixed almost immediately once you brought it to my attention.
Okay. Mr. Connor, you wanted me to remind you about board comments.
Yes, very quickly. The dedication of the Cherry Valley Gymnasium to Medal of Honor recipient Leonard Keller was last night. It was extremely well attended, I thought. And first of all, I want to thank the board for really all the support through the entire process. I want to thank the administration for really doing a great job. I hope all of you have the opportunity to go see the plaque. It's very impressive. But the whole coordination, thanks to the administration, really good job. And to the administration at the school, to the principal and assistant principal, what a great job. They coordinated all this. They really did a great job. I would say, in my estimation, there were probably 40 to 50 people there, 4 o'clock on a Monday night. So really, and there were a ton of veterans, and thank you to the veterans, not just for their service, but for them to show up and being that active. So I wanted to take this time to say all kinds of thanks, and I'm really proud of us as a district. One thing a friend of mine told me, and I guess I kind of knew this, but he brought it to my attention again, is that the only Medal of Honor winner ever from Winnebago County is Leonard B. Keller. And so we've done the right thing by really dedicating and honoring his accomplishments. So, again, thanks to everybody.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, I'll take a motion and a second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 7:20 PM.